Somewhere along the bayous of Louisiana, in a parish whose exact location has been intentionally blurred in surviving records, there exists a written account that challenges everything we think we know about endurance, instinct, and the razor-thin line between human will and animal nature. Court papers from 1847 mention an incident involving 8 hunting dogs, a locked underground room, and a young woman who emerged after 72 hours not as a victim, but as something the local magistrate described only as a presence of authority I cannot explain and dare not question. The plantation where this happened was burned to the ground within a week, its remnants scattered, its documentation destroyed. And yet, 3 independent letters from neighboring landowners, now stored in a private archive in Baton Rouge, recount the same impossible sight. A girl no older than 19 walking calmly to the front gates at dawn, 8 enormous hounds trailing behind her in flawless formation, their eyes fixed on her with what one witness called the devotion of disciples. The mistress, who owned both the young woman and the dogs, a titled noblewoman, was found dead in her bedroom that same morning. The official cause was recorded as heart failure. What happened inside that cellar was never formally investigated, never spoken of in public, and deliberately erased from the parish ledger. Until now, the full account has survived only in scattered fragments across Louisiana's forgotten repositories. Before we continue what unfolded on the DeVoe estate in St. Landry Parish, I need you to do one thing. If this introduction alone has already sent a chill through you, hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel brings you stories exactly like this. Stories balanced between documented history and the inexplicable. And leave a comment telling me what city or state you're watching from. I want to see where our community of mystery seekers is growing. Now, let's uncover what truly happened in that cellar and why someone believed the truth was worth wiping from every official record. The chain of events that would forever darken the DeVoe name began not with the girl or the hounds, but with the arrival of a widow in Louisiana's sugar country. St. Landry Parish in the 1840s existed as a patchwork of old French pride and rising American ambition, where the rhythms of sugarcane dictated everything, from courtship to reputation. The parish stretched across lush lowlands where cypress marshes gave way to endless rows of cane, and the air hung so wet and heavy it made wool garments cling to the skin and tempers burn hot. This was Acadian country, where French remained the preferred language of the established families, where Catholic saints watched from every mantle, and where the harsh arithmetic of plantation economics went mostly unquestioned by those enriched by it. The town of Opelousas served as the parish seat, a modest cluster of buildings arranged around a central square. The courthouse's columns were already weathered despite being less than 20 years old. On Saturdays, this square filled with planters' wives examining New Orleans fabrics, enslaved workers carrying out errands beneath overseers' eyes, and traveling preachers warning of judgment. But the true authority of St. Landry did not sit in Opelousas. It lived on the sprawling estates that operated like small kingdoms, each governed entirely by the person whose name appeared on the deed. The DeVoe property lay 7 miles northwest of town, reachable only by a shell road that turned useless in heavy rain. The land had originally belonged to the Fontenelle family, prosperous French Creoles who built their wealth on advantageous marriages and relentless efficiency. When the last Fontenelle heir died childless in 1843, the estate passed through a maze of transactions until it landed in the hands of a woman few locals had ever seen. Baroness DeVoe arrived in Louisiana in April 1844. She traveled from Charleston with a procession of attendants, several trunks of European decor, and a reputation that had reached the parish long before she had. She was a widow of a minor Belgian noble whose death, rumor suggested, had been oddly beneficial to her finances. She appeared to be around 40, though she dressed as if she refused to acknowledge that number, favoring bright, expensive fabrics guaranteed to draw the room's attention. Her face still carried a fading elegance, the kind that required constant curation and bristled at any reminder of age. But what people remembered most were her eyes. They held a sharp, measuring coldness, as if they assessed the monetary value of everything they touched. She spoke French with a wavering European lilt, English with clipped precision, and made it known she considered the local Creole dialect beneath her. Within weeks of her arrival, she dismissed half the estate's labor force, replaced the overseer with a man named Gaspard Thibaud, dismissed from 3 previous posts for excessive cruelty, and established a disciplinary regime so severe that even neighboring planters, hardly men of kindness, exchanged uneasy looks. The baroness had also brought from Charleston 8 massive hunting dogs, powerful brutes bred from mastiffs and bloodhounds, each nearly 3 feet tall at the shoulder. She boasted that they had been trained by a specialist in South Carolina who worked exclusively with what she called dogs of intimidation. "They are not pets," she announced at her first summer dinner party. "They are instruments, tools designed to dominate through size, hunger, and the constant threat of force." She kept them in a purpose-built kennel behind the main house and fed them on a strict schedule meant to keep them always alert, always dangerous. She named each dog after a European dynastic line: Bourbon, Savoy, Habsburg, Hohenzollern, Romanov, Wenzel, and Medici. It amused her, she told guests, to have aristocratic bloodlines serving at her command. The beast obeyed only her voice, sharp commands delivered in German. And to everyone else, including Thibaud, they bared their teeth. In the fall of 1844, the baroness purchased a girl at the New Orleans slave market. The transaction was recorded in a ledger that still exists today, though the girl's name was entered only as female, estimated age 16, Virginia estate sale. The broker's margin notes describe her as unusually willful for her age. Prior owner reports repeated disobedience. Discount reflects difficult temperament. The baroness paid $400, well below the standard rate, and had the girl delivered to St. Landry in chains. On the plantation, the girl was given the name Margina. It wasn't a name she carried from Virginia, but the baroness preferred it because it sounded refined, easy to shout across a room, and because the girl's real name, her mother's name, was of no importance to her. Margina stood about 5 feet 4, with the kind of slight build shaped by years of interrupted growth and too little food. Her hands bore the rough calluses of field labor, though her previous owner's note suggested she'd recently begun training for house service before an unspecified incident led to her sale. What set Margina apart, what had almost certainly caused her trouble in Virginia, were her eyes. They didn't drop when white people spoke to her. They didn't widen or tremble the way enslavers expected. They observed, they measured, they held a sharp intelligence that unsettled overseers. The baroness noticed this immediately and found it amusing. This was something to break, something that would make its breaking gratifying. Margina's first duties were inside the main house, cleaning rooms, laying fires, serving meals. During those early weeks, the baroness watched her constantly, waiting for any misstep that might justify punishment. She found it in late November, when Margina failed to curtsy quickly enough after receiving an instruction. The penalty was 20 lashes in the yard, carried out by Thibaud while the entire household staff was forced to watch. Margina endured the whipping in silence, her face turned aside, her jaw clenched so tightly that blood appeared where she bit into her cheek. That silence, the refusal to scream, infuriated the baroness more deeply than open defiance might have. A pattern formed over the following months. The baroness assigned tasks no one could complete, then punished Margina for failing. She planted objects among the girl's belongings, then accused her of theft. She gave instructions, later changed them, and raged when Margina failed to obey orders she had never been given. The other enslaved people learned to avoid her, knowing that the baroness's obsession meant danger for anyone nearby. Thibaud joked darkly about how long she would last, whether her resolve would break before her body failed. But Margina did not break. She bent. She survived. Something within her remained untouched. Something the baroness could see in those watching eyes, still calculating, still refusing to be smothered. It became an obsession. This one enslaved girl who would not fold away every other person eventually had. In March of 1845, a man claiming to be the Baroness's late husband from an earlier marriage, a fact she had never mentioned, arrived unannounced from Charleston. He stayed for 2 weeks. The Baroness's mood improved dramatically. She barely acknowledged Margina's presence during his visit, devoting herself entirely to entertaining her guest. The staff whispered that she might return to Charleston, that perhaps they would be sold to someone less cruel. But when the visitor departed, something in the Baroness shifted into permanent shadow. Gaspard Thibaud, who kept meticulous notes on estate operations, wrote in his journal that April 1845 marked a stark change in her behavior. She began spending long hours in the dog kennels, training the animals herself, developing patterns of commands and reactions. She cut their feeding schedule further, keeping them in a razor-edge state of controlled starvation that made them fiercer, quicker to aggression. She ordered Thibaud to construct a cellar beneath the kennels, an 8-foot square room with a packed earth floor, cypress board walls, one entrance through a trapdoor and no windows. She offered no explanation for its purpose. Margina continued her work in the main house, almost invisible now. The Baroness barely looked at her, as if her interest had burned out entirely. Other servants eased their guard, believing the worst had passed. Margina herself showed no sign of relief or worry. She simply kept moving through each day. Then came the matter of the missing silver. May 17th, 1847 dawned heavy and gray, the kind of morning where breathing felt like pulling air through wet cloth. As always, Margina woke before sunrise and began her routine, emptying chamber pots, lighting fires in the downstairs rooms, preparing the breakfast service. The house was quiet except for the slow awakening of the estate. Distant roosters calling, timbers settling with soft creaks, the faint shuffle of other house servants beginning their tasks. The Baroness rarely appeared before 9, giving the staff a few merciful hours each morning. Margina worked with practiced efficiency, already planning the rest of the day. She had learned, painfully, to anticipate the Baroness's whims, to complete tasks before being ordered, to be useful enough to avoid notice but never so competent that it provoked envy. At 8 o'clock, as she polished silver in the dining room, she heard the Baroness's bedroom door open upstairs, much earlier than usual. Footsteps crossed the hall, descended the staircase quickly, and then the Baroness appeared in the doorway, still in her dressing gown, hair unpinned, eyes blazing with the expression Margina had learned meant danger. "Where is it?" Her voice was low, too controlled, the kind of calm that came before violence. Margina set down the spoon she'd been polishing and rose, eyes lowered according to protocol. "My bracelet," the Baroness said coldly. "The gold bracelet with sapphires. It was on my nightstand last night. This morning it is gone." She stepped into the room, circling Margina slowly. "You were in my chambers yesterday afternoon, changing linens." "Yes, ma'am." "I didn't see any bracelet." "You didn't see it," the Baroness hissed, "or you saw it and took it." "I didn't take anything, ma'am." The Baroness finished her slow circle and stood. Now between Margina and the doorway, empty her pockets. Margina did as ordered, pulling out the lining of her apron pockets to show only a cloth rag and a small sliver of soap. The Baroness watched her closely, her jaw moving faintly as if she were chewing something bitter. "Your quarters, then," she said. "We'll search your quarters." The search lasted less than 5 minutes. The small room Margina shared with 2 other house servants contained nothing but sleeping pallets and a few worn garments. The bracelet was not there. The Baroness stood in the doorway, her expression tightening, her hands opening and closing as though she didn't know whether she wanted to strike something or break it. "Thibaud." Her voice rang through the house. The overseer appeared almost instantly, a wiry man with thinning hair, permanently sunburned skin, and a riding crop. He carried more for show than need, slapping it lightly against his leg as he walked. "Take her to the yard," the Baroness said. 20 lashes for theft." "Ma'am, I didn't—" The Baroness struck her across the mouth before the sentence finished. "Don't speak. Don't you dare speak." Margina tasted blood where her lips split against her teeth. She kept her eyes lowered, her body utterly still, waiting. Actually, no. The Baroness's voice shifted, thoughtful now, which was somehow far more terrifying than her rage. No, I have something better in mind. She turned to Tybalt. Take her to the cellar, the lower room, lock her in. Tybalt's eyebrows rose slightly. The room beneath the kennels, ma'am? Yes. For how long? The Baroness smiled, an expression that never touched her eyes. Until I decide she's learned proper respect. A day, perhaps two. Let her think about her theft in the dark. Let her listen to the dogs above her and understand what happens to thieves on my estate. Tybalt nodded. Yes, ma'am. And food? No food. Water twice a day. I want her hungry when I bring her out. I want her to understand deprivation. They marched Margina across the grounds of the kennel building, a long, low structure that housed the 8 hounds in separate runs. The animals erupted the moment the door opened, their thunderous barking filling the air, massive bodies slamming against the gates, the whole building shuddering from their weight. Tybalt led her to the far end where a trapdoor sat padlocked into the floor. Down you go. He unlocked the padlock and lifted the door, revealing a wooden ladder disappearing into darkness. The smell rising from below, damp earth, old timber, and something else, something animal and sour, turned Margina's stomach. She descended the ladder. It dropped about 10 feet before ending in complete blackness. Above her, the trapdoor slammed shut, followed by the metallic click of the lock. She heard Tybalt's boots walking away. The dogs continued barking for several minutes, then slowly settled. As her eyes adjusted to the faint trickle of light seeping through hairline cracks in the floorboards above, the cellar revealed itself exactly as Tybalt had described. 8 feet square, perhaps 7 feet high at its center, where the low ceiling peaked. The dirt floor was cool and slightly damp. The walls were made of rough cypress boards fitted so tightly no outside light penetrated. Air came only through the gaps in the boards overhead, carrying the heavy scent of the dogs and occasional dust or straw. A single wooden bucket sat in one corner, her only concession to necessity. There was no blanket, no cot, no lamp, just dirt, wood, and darkness. Margina sat with her back against the wall, knees drawn up, arms around her legs, her mouth still bleeding where the Baroness had struck her. She could hear the dogs above her, their breathing, the shift of their weight, the scrape of claws. Sometimes one barked, and the others answered, then fell silent again. She had endured worse in Virginia. They had once locked her in a smokehouse for 3 days for speaking back to an overseer's wife. This cellar was larger than that smokehouse, and it wasn't midsummer. She could endure a day, maybe 2. Eventually the Baroness would grow bored and decide she needed Margina working again. What Margina didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the Baroness had no plan to release her after a day or 2. The first 24 hours passed in a haze of discomfort rather than terror. Tybalt brought water at dawn and dusk, lowering a cup on a string, saying nothing, waiting only long enough for her to drink before pulling it back up. The dogs settled into ignoring her presence. Margina slept in brief, shallow bursts, her body adjusting to the packed dirt floor, her mind purposely emptied of thought. The second day brought hunger, real hunger, not the usual background ache, but sharp, twisting cramps. The darkness pressed closer. Time worked. She counted Tybalt's water drops, 12 hours apart, but everything in between began to smear together. On the 3rd day, Tybalt didn't come. Margina waited, listening for his steps. She heard nothing except the dogs shifting above her. Her mouth felt like dust, her tongue thick. Hunger sharpened into something primal, something consuming. She called out once, her voice cracking, but no one answered. That night, the 4th night, she heard different steps above, lighter, quicker, accompanied by the faint rustle of skirts. The Baroness, Are you thirsty, Margina? The voice slipped through the floorboards, syrup sweet and mocking. Are you hungry? Are you ready to confess your theft? Margina didn't answer. Her throat was too dry, her mind too consumed by need. I found my bracelet this morning, the baroness said, behind my dresser, right where I must have knocked it days ago. Isn't that interesting? You were innocent all along. A pause. The dogs panted softly. But you're still down there, aren't you? Because this was never about the bracelet. Her tone sharpened. This is about you learning your place. About that look in your eyes. The one you think I don't notice. That spark of defiance you kept alive. Her voice lowered into a cold whisper. I'm going to put it out, Margina. I'm going to leave you there until there's nothing left in you except obedience. The baroness's footsteps moved too, moving in different positions above her, as though she were pacing. I've made a decision, the baroness said at last. I've decided on an experiment, a test of survival. If you will, the hounds above you haven't eaten in 3 days. They're starving, desperate, as hungry as you are right now. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to open that trapdoor and send them down to you, all 8. Starving, trained, disciplined, and faced with something weak and helpless. Nature will take its course. The strong will consume the weak. My noble bloodlines will feast on a defiant girl who dare look at me as an equal. There's a certain poetry in that, don't you think? Margina pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding so violently she could feel her pulse throbbing in her throat. Or, the baroness continued, her voice honeyed with cruelty, you can save yourself. You can scream, beg, and promise me the absolute submission I require. You can weep, plead, and offer me the broken spirit I've been trying to tear out of you since the day you arrived. You have until dawn to decide. After that, the choice won't be yours. Her footsteps drifted away. A door closed. The dogs above settled into uneasy silence, punctuated by occasional whining and shifting weight. Margina crouched in the darkness, her mind racing through possibilities, through the cold calculation of survival. 8 starving dogs. A confined space with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. No tools, no weapon, no exit. The baroness hadn't lied. Nature would take its course. The dogs would smell fear. They would sense weakness. They would behave exactly as she had trained them to, unless the hierarchy could be changed. An idea took shape, not from hope but from observation, from months of watching the baroness manipulate these animals, from childhood memories of livestock and their instinctive rules, from 2 brutal years spent analyzing cruelty just to endure it. The dogs weren't companions. They were instruments. They were conditioned to recognize power. They were structured around dominance. And in every pack, dominance could shift under pressure. Hunger destabilized them. Confinement destabilized them. The one thing the baroness had spent years trying to crush in Margina, the core will, the refusal to break, was the one thing that might save her life. The remaining hours of night became preparation. Using her fingers, she dug into the packed dirt, creating a shallow depression to anchor her feet if the dogs lunged. She tore strips from her dress and wrapped them around her arms and hands to form crude protection. She stood in the center of the cellar, away from the walls, giving herself the most space possible. She regulated her breathing, suppressing panic and molding it into icy focus. And most importantly, she made her choice. When the dogs entered, she would not scream. She would not crawl or shrink. She would stand as another starving creature, another predator, refusing to be prey. It was insane. It was impossible. It was the only chance she had. Dawn appeared through thin cracks overhead. Margina heard the baroness arrive, heard Tybalt with her, heard the metallic sound of kennel gates being opened one by one. The dogs began to move, claws clicking on wood, their breathing heavy and urgent. They had been conditioned to associate the opening of gates with feeding. Today, they expected relief from 3 days of agony. And today, the baroness intended to direct that hunger downward. The padlock clicked. The trapdoor lifted. Before we uncover what occurred when those 8 starving dogs entered the cellar with Margina, I need you to pause and do something for me. If this story has you as captivated as I am while telling it, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who appreciates the darkest corners of American history. And comment below with your theories. Could any young woman survive what the baroness had orchestrated? Could anyone possibly emerge from such a cellar alive? The truth is far more disturbing than anything you're imagining. Don't go anywhere, because what happened in that Louisiana cellar defies every assumption about instinct and will. The first dog descended the ladder with surprising grace for an animal of his size. Brutus, the largest of the 8, must have weighed close to 130 pounds. His coat was mottled brown and black, and his eyes adapted instantly to the gloom. He reached the earthen floor and oriented toward Margina immediately, his body tightening, his lips curling just enough to reveal yellowing teeth. 3 days without food had stripped away every layer of domestic training. What remained was a pure predator faced with something that smelled like sustenance. Margina did not move. She stood in the center of the cellar, feet grounded, hands wrapped and loose at her sides, her eyes locked onto his. Not in a hard stare challenge, but in the steady watching gaze of another creature aware of him, reading him, neither aggressive nor submissive. The dog shifted left. Margina turned with him, maintaining the locked gaze and keeping her body oriented toward him. The second dog descended. Savoy, smaller and quicker, then Habsburg, then Romanoff. Within 2 minutes, all 8 were in the cellar with her, their combined mass filling the space. Their breathing thickened in enclosed air. The trapdoor above remained open. The baroness's face hovered in the opening, framed by the morning light. "She's not even screaming," Thibaud said, his tone tinged with confusion. "She will," the baroness murmured. "Give them a moment." The dogs began arranging themselves in a pattern Margina recognized, forming a loose circle, determining rank, selecting the one who would strike first. Brutus stayed in front, but Wendell and Grimaldi moved to flanking positions, cutting off escape routes she didn't intend to use anyway. Then Margina did something no one watching from above could possibly understand. She stepped forward, directly toward Brutus. The dog froze. This was not prey behavior. Prey ran. Prey cowered. Prey submitted. This was something different. Something that interrupted instinct and triggered another set of rules entirely. Margina took another step, closing the distance to 4 feet. She could smell, now, the sour smell of unwashed fur and starvation, the stench rising off him in waves. She could see the tension rippling through his muscles, the calculation flickering behind his eyes. And then she did something even more unexpected. She lowered herself onto one knee, shrinking her height, reducing the threat of her posture, but she kept her gaze steady, kept her shoulders square, kept a quality in her stance that conveyed not submission, but a kind of parity. She extended one wrapped hand, not in offering and not in challenge, but in acknowledgement, as if recognizing him. Brutus's head tilted, confusion flickering through him. The other dogs froze where they stood, watching their leader, waiting for the cue to strike. The cellar held a stillness so absolute it felt like the air itself had stopped moving. 8 starving dogs and 1 starving woman, each of them teetering on a knife's edge between violence and something far stranger. Margina spoke. Her voice emerged rough, cracked from days without water, barely more than a whisper, but steady. "You're hungry. I'm hungry. All of us are hungry." The baroness laughed from above, her voice sharp as shattered glass. "She's gone mad." The fear broke her mind. But Margina continued, not speaking to Baroness at all, but to the dogs and to herself, and to whatever thin thread of instinct or intelligence hung in the air between 2 species. "She made us this way. You've been starved, controlled, turned into weapons. You know what it is to be owned, to be someone's tool." She shifted slightly, still kneeling, inching toward the corner where she had dug the shallow pit hours earlier. The dogs watched her, Every movement, every breath, but none lunged. Brutus stepped forward, sniffing, his aggression bending toward curiosity. Margina reached the corner and dug again, using her wrapped hands to deepen the hole. The dogs moved closer, drawn to the activity. Their predatory focus tugged off its axis by the strange, deliberate behavior. She could feel them around her now, their hot breath on her back, their bodies forming a ring of hunger and uncertainty. She pulled from the dirt what she had buried earlier, a dead rat. The cellar had its share of rodents, as all such spaces did. Margina had found this one on her first night, already dead, likely poisoned. She had kept it hidden, knowing it wasn't a weapon, wasn't even really a plan, but anything was better than nothing. Now, she held it up. 8 sets of eyes snapped to it instantly. Without hesitation, Margina ripped the small corpse in half with her hands. The act grim and utilitarian. She threw one half to the far corner. For dogs lunged, snarling, but Brutus overpowered them and swallowed the scrap in seconds. She threw the second half to the opposite corner, where the remaining dogs wrestled briefly until Wendell forced the others back and claimed it. The entire frenzy lasted maybe half a minute. When it was over, all 8 dogs turned back to Margina, still ravenous, but now with something new forming in their minds. She had given them food. She had eased their hunger, even in a small way. She had become, in her simple but powerful logic, a source. "That won't save you," the baroness shouted down. One rat divided among 9. "You've only whetted their appetite." But something in the cellar had changed. Margina lowered herself into a sitting position, leaning back against the wall, making her posture calm and unthreatening despite her racing heart. The dogs approached again, sniffing more intensely, their noses pushed against her arms, her legs, her cheeks. She stayed still. She allowed them to map her scent without fear twisting through it. Brutus pressed his enormous head against her chest, almost knocking her over. She steadied herself, and with careful slowness, she lifted a wrapped hand to scratch the spot behind his ears. His tail, which had been a stiff rod, gave one uncertain wag. His ears softened forward. Seeing their leader respond, the others crowded closer. Margina sat encircled by 8 starving animals, each capable of killing her in seconds, each raised by the baroness to dominate. Yet in that instant, they weren't attacking. They were confused, recalibrating, responding to something in her bearing that did not align with any part of their training. "This is impossible," Tybalt muttered from above. "They should have torn her apart." "Give them time," the baroness snapped, though her voice lacked its earlier confidence. The hours that followed would later be recorded by Tybalt in his journal as contrary to every natural law and principle of animal conduct I have observed in 30 years of handling hounds. The dogs did not attack. Instead, they settled around Margina in the cellar, pressing their bodies against hers for warmth. Their hunger remained, but had been reorganized beneath a shifting pack dynamic that was rewriting itself minute by minute. Margina spoke to them all morning, her words insignificant in meaning yet crucial in tone. She positioned herself not as leader, not as subordinate, but as another creature trapped in the same misery. Fellow survivor, fellow captive. The dogs, trained to respond only to dominance, found themselves responding instead to something they had never been given: solidarity. The baroness watched for hours, her face above the trapdoor twisting between frustration and disbelief. She shouted commands in German, commands the dogs had been conditioned to obey, but they ignored her. At midday, she hurled pieces of dried meat into the cellar, expecting a fight. Instead, the dogs ate in calm sequence, and Brutus brought a chunk to Margina, dropping it gently at her feet. "How is she doing this?" the baroness whispered, real fear edging into her anger. No one had an answer. Not Tybalt, not the house servants who had crept near the kennel after rumors spread that something unnatural was happening beneath it. As the afternoon wore on, Margina began moving in slow, intentional paths around the cellar. The dogs moved with her, mirroring her pace. Their formation had shifted from predatory to protective. When she walked toward the ladder, they closed ranks behind her. When she sat, they formed a circle around her. Their allegiance to the baroness, built over years through fear and conditioning, was dissolving beneath the weight of shared hunger and shared captivity. By evening of that first day, the dynamic had inverted entirely from what the baroness intended. The dogs were no longer threatening Margina. They were guarding her. The baroness, confronted with the collapse of her experiment and humiliated by the visible breakdown of the control she believed absolute, made a decision that would ultimately end her life. She ordered Thibaud to go down into the cellar and drag Margina up, to forcibly separate her from the dogs and reassert the hierarchy she felt slipping away. Thibaud, to his credit, immediately recognized the insanity in this command. "Ma'am, those dogs will rip apart anyone who goes near her now. They bonded to her somehow. I can't explain it, but I know going down there would be suicide." "Then bring the dogs up," the baroness snapped. "Bring them up and we'll separate them from her." "They won't come without her," Thibaud said. "Look at them." And it was true. When Thibaud called the dogs using the sharp German commands they had been trained to obey, not one moved. They remained pressed around Margina, eyes alert, bodies positioned between her and whatever danger waited above. The baroness's face, visible to the trapdoor opening, fluttered through emotions, confusion, fury, disbelief, before settling on something far darker. Hatred, pure, undiluted hatred. This girl, this property, this insignificant thing she had purchased for $400 had achieved something the baroness herself never had: unquestioning loyalty from beast bred and trained for dominance. "Fine," the baroness said at last. We wait until she's too weak to hold whatever spell she's cast on them. Hunger will break this ridiculous bond. Nature will correct itself. They will remember what they are." She slammed the trapdoor shut. The padlock snapped into place. In the darkness below, Margina sat surrounded by 8 dogs, their bodies pressed against hers for warmth. She could feel their breath, hear their restless stomachs. She knew the baroness would bring no more food, no more water. The new plan was obvious. Starve them all, force the dogs to decide between loyalty and survival. Margina had bought time, had created an impossible alliance, but unless something changed, they would all die in this pit. The question now was how long instinct could be drowned out by loyalty, how long before hunger overpowered whatever fragile bond had formed. The answer was 72 hours. 3 days during which the baroness waited for screams that never came, for snarls and violence that never echoed. 3 days during which Thibaud reported only silence, slow shifting sounds, dogs that, despite a week without food, seemed to be conserving energy rather than tearing their prisoner apart. 3 days during which the baroness's certainty began to fracture. On the morning of May 21st, 1847, she made her final mistake. The decision to open the trapdoor was not born strategy. It was desperation. She had barely slept. She had paced her chambers for 3 nights, tormented by the absence of violence below. She sent Thibaud again and again to press his ear against the floorboards, demanding an account of what he heard. His answers enraged her: movement, breathing, an occasional whine, nothing more. The house staff had begun whispering, quietly, cautiously, but whispering nonetheless. They exchanged glances filled with disbelief and something close to awe. The girl in the cellar had survived 4 days with 8 starving hounds. She had created an alliance that contradicted everything anyone understood about predator and prey. The baroness could not abide it, not the survival itself, but the undermining of her power. So on that humid morning, she ordered Thibaud to gather the male servants, 5 men, and arm them with long animal handling poles. She declared that she would open the trapdoor. The men would separate the girl from the dogs by force if necessary. The hounds would be hauled up one by one, confined again, and Margina would be retrieved and punished properly for whatever sorcery she had used. Thibaud made a final attempt. Ma'am, those dogs haven't eaten in a week. If we provoke them now, there's no telling what they'll do. They're animals, the baroness snapped. They follow strength. They fear pain. We'll remind them of both. At dawn, the men gathered in the kennel building. The air hung heavy with the thick humidity that often preceded Louisiana storms. The baroness stood beside the trapdoor, dressed in her riding clothes as though she were preparing for a pleasant hunt instead of confronting her own cruelty. She held a pistol, more symbolic than practical, since discharging in confined space below would be suicidal. "Open it," she commanded. Tybalt unlocked the padlock and lifted the trapdoor. The smell that drifted up made several men recoil. Stale confinement, waste, and days of human and animal breath trapped in an airless box. Light poured downward, revealing a sight no one expected. Margina sat upright in the center of the cellar, spine perfectly straight despite the weakness hollowing her cheeks and darkening her eyes. Her clothes were torn and filthy. The 8 dogs lay arranged around her in a flawless circle, their bodies touching hers, forming a living shield. 16 eyes, 8 human-like in focus, 8 canine, looked upward together, unified by something impossible to categorize. Not fear, not submission, something closer to defiance. "Margina," the baroness called, her voice dipping into the sweet, dangerous register everyone in her house had learned to dread. "It's time to come up. Your punishment is over. Come now, and we'll forget this entire unfortunate incident." Margina didn't respond. She didn't move. Her eyes locked onto the baroness's face with such fierce focus that the woman's confident smile wavered. "I said come up. That's an order." Still nothing. The dogs shifted, muscles tightening, bodies lowering, responding instantly to the threat in the baroness's tone. The baroness's composure snapped. "You will obey me. I own you. I own your life, your body, your breath. You will climb this ladder immediately, or I will have you dragged up and beaten until you cannot stand." Margina finally spoke. Her voice was hoarse from dehydration and disuse, but clear and unwavering. "No." The word cracked through the kennel like a rifle shot. The gathered men exchanged uneasy glances. The baroness's face blanched, then flushed red, her grip tightening around the pistol. "What did you just say?" "No, I'm not coming up alone. We're coming up together, all 9 of us, or we're staying down here. You don't give orders anymore. Not to me, not to them." It was the single most direct act of rebellion the baroness had ever encountered. Her entire life had been built upon the certainty of her dominance. And now a girl she had purchased, an object in her mind, was refusing her command and claiming authority over the very animals she believed she controlled. "Tybalt, send the men down. Drag her up." Tybalt hesitated. "Ma'am, if we go down there, those dogs will attack. I'm certain of it." "They're bluffing," the baroness spat. "They're weak from hunger. 6 men with poles can subdue 8 starving animals and 1 insolent slave." But as the men approached the trapdoor with their poles ready, something happened. Something every one of those men and Tybalt himself would later describe in identical detail. The dogs stood as one, their movements synchronized like trained soldiers. They positioned themselves between the ladder and Margina with flawless precision. Brutus stepped forward, lowering his massive head, baring his teeth in a snarl that promised absolute lethal violence. Behind him, the other 7 formed a wall. No openings, no weak points, no feasible path to reach Margina without crossing a line that meant certain death. The first man to set his foot on the ladder, a field hand named Batiste who had spent his life working with animals, took one look at Brutus's expression and stepped back. "I'm not going down there, ma'am. That dog will kill the first man who tries." "Then we starve them longer," the baroness screamed. "Close the door. No food, no water, nothing. We'll wait until they're too weak to resist." "Begging your pardon, ma'am," Tybalt said quietly, "but it's already been a week. If starvation was going to break whatever this is, it would have happened by now. The baroness spun toward him, her face twisted with rage. Are you defying me too? Are you joining the mutiny? I can replace an overseer just as easily as I replace a slave. I'm only stating the truth, Thibaud said. Your strategy isn't working. Then what do you suggest? She demanded. What would you do? He looked down into the cellar, at the girl and the dogs pressed around her, at the living barrier they formed. Thibaud was a cruel man by profession, but he understood the limits of force. I'd let her up, ma'am. Let her come with the dogs. See what happens above ground. Absolutely not. That would be admitting defeat. With respect, ma'am, defeat has already happened. The only question is whether we acknowledge it or escalate it. The baroness froze, caught between her worldview and the undeniable reality unfolding beneath her feet. She had crafted the perfect punishment, the perfect object lesson in submission. Now it had transformed into something that shattered her beliefs about power and control. Then Margina spoke again, and her voice carried a strength she should not have possessed. I'm coming up. The dogs are coming with me. You can close that door and leave us here to die. It won't take much longer. Or you can step back and let us out. Either way, you've already lost. How dare you? You wanted to break me, Margina said, her voice echoing upward. You wanted to extinguish whatever you saw in my eyes. You tried whipping me, starving me, and when none of that worked, you sent 8 starving beasts to tear me apart. But I'm still here. I'm still myself. And now the dogs know exactly what you are. The baroness raised a pistol, pointing it straight down into the cellar. Her hand trembled with rage, or fear, or both. I could shoot you right now, she hissed. 1 bullet, and this ends. You could, Margina replied calmly. But then you'd have 8 starving dogs in a sealed cellar with only one way out. And that exit leads straight through 6 terrified men who won't go near them. Fire that gun and see what happens next. It was a bluff. Or maybe it wasn't. The dogs certainly looked ready. Coiled with tension, eyes burning with a predator's promise. Several men backed away instinctively. The baroness's hand shook harder. Her finger brushed the trigger. The moment stretched in as a wire, ready to snap into carnage. And then something happened that no one expected. If you're leaning forward right now, good. Because what came next was described in contemporary accounts as impossible, unnatural, a violation of every known law of survival. This is the moment when the plantation's entire hierarchy trembled and began to collapse. Thibaud made the decision for her. The overseer stepped forward, placed his hand on the baroness's arm, and gently but firmly pushed the pistol downward. Ma'am, please, if you shoot her, we'll all die in this building. Let me handle it. The baroness turned on him with blazing fury, but something in his expression, fear, resignation, experience, made her pause. She had hired him to manage danger, and if he was advocating retreat, fine, she said at last, her voice clipped and trembling. Get her up here. But she's to be restrained immediately, and the dogs separated from her. Thibaud nodded. Though he had absolutely no intention of carrying out that order, he stepped toward the trapdoor and called down, keeping his voice carefully neutral. Margina, I'm stepping back. You can come up with the dogs. No one will interfere. Once you're up here, we'll discuss what happens next. From below, Margina studied him, trying to determine whether this was a genuine offer or the beginning of another trick. The dogs remained rigid around her, their bodies tense, waiting for her cue. At last, she gave a small nod and moved toward the ladder. What happened next will be described by 7 different witnesses with remarkable consistency, despite the impossibility of what they claimed to have seen. Margina climbed slowly, every movement deliberate, her limbs weak from starvation and confinement. And then, one by one, the dogs followed. They climbed the ladder behind her with startling agility for their size. They did not shove or scramble. They ascended in an orderly sequence. Brutus first, then Wendell, then the others. Like a practice formation, Margina emerged into the kennel house, standing in morning light for the first time in a week. She looked ghostly, her clothes hanging off her frame, her skin pale beneath layers of dirt, her hair tangled and wild. But her eyes, those eyes that had so enraged Baroness, were sharp, unwavering. She stepped aside from the trapdoor. The dogs climbed out behind her and immediately formed that same protective circle. The Baroness and the assembled men had backed themselves against the far wall, leaving a wide berth. The Baroness still held the pistol, but her arm hung slack at her side. Her expression was a mixture of hatred, confusion, and the first flicker of something she had never felt toward a slave, fear. "What are you?" she whispered. "I'm exactly what you tried to destroy," Margina said. Her voice strengthened with every sentence, fueled by 2 years of silent fury. "I'm someone who refuses to break. You bought me because I was cheap," she continued. "Because some fool in Virginia thought defiance made me worthless. You tried to break me with work, with beatings, with starvation, with humiliation. And when none of that worked, you try to have me ripped apart by dogs. But I'm still here. I'm still whole. And now the dogs understand something you never could." The Baroness's voice cracked. "And what is that?" "That cruelty isn't strength," Margina said. "That fear isn't loyalty. That to you, we are all just survival, tools to be used and discarded. They spent years learning to fear you. Then they spent 4 days in that cellar with someone who treated them like fellow captives. And they made their choice." The Baroness barked a humorless laugh. "You think you've won? This changes nothing. They're dogs. You're a slave. I am the law here. This ends with you in chains and those animals back in their cages." "No," Margina said. She stepped forward. The dogs stepped with her. "Everyone here saw what happened. They know you tried to have me killed. They know you failed. They know your control over your own animals has crumbled. How long before the field hands here? How long before every enslaved person realizes you aren't invincible? How long before someone else refuses you?" The Baroness's expression twisted through panic, fury, disbelief. Tybalt, Caesar, use whatever force necessary. But Tybalt didn't move. Neither did the other men. They looked at Margina, at the dogs circling her, at the impossible reality unfolding before them. And they understood that something foundational had collapsed. The Baroness's authority relied on the illusion of unquestionable superiority, and that illusion had shattered. "This is mutiny," the Baroness hissed. "This is rebellion. I'll have you all punished. I'll have every—" She never finished. Margina took another step forward, and this time the Baroness stepped back, away from a slave and 8 dogs she once commanded. That step backward changed everything. In that single moment, in front of witnesses, the Baroness yielded. Margina walked toward the kennel door. The dogs accompanied her, maintaining their formation. The men pressed themselves against the walls to let her pass. The Baroness stood frozen, the pistol dangling uselessly from her hand, her mouth opening and closing without sound. At the threshold, Margina turned back. "I'm leaving. I'm walking off this plantation, and these dogs are coming with me. You can try to stop me, shoot me in the back with witnesses standing here. Or you can let me go. Either way, everyone will know what happened in that cellar. They'll know you lost." "You won't make it 10 miles, the Baroness said, her voice shaking. "They'll catch you before nightfall. They'll drag you back in chains. And when they do, what you suffer will seem merciful." "Maybe," Margina said, "but I'd rather die free than live as your property. And I'm not the only one here who feels that way." She stepped out into the sunlight. The 8 dogs followed in tight formation, their bodies poised, their eyes scanning for danger. The men watched as she crossed a yard, walked past the big house, and headed toward the long road leading away from the estate. The Baroness stood paralyzed for nearly 30 seconds, her mind collapsing under the weight of consequences she had never imagined. Then she lifted the pistol and fired. The shot went wide, whether intentionally or from trembling hands, embedding itself in a tree 20 feet to Margina's right. The blast echoed across the plantation. Field workers and house servants came running, drawn by the noise. They saw Margina walking calmly toward the road, surrounded by 8 massive dogs. They saw the baroness standing in the kennel doorway with a smoking pistol. They saw Thibaud gripping the baroness's arm to stop her from firing again. "Let her go," Thibaud said. "For God's sake, let her go." But the baroness wasn't listening. She stood completely fixated on Margina's retreating figure, on the 8 dogs that had once been her prized symbols of control, now following a girl she believed she owned. She stared at the living proof of her failure to dominate, to crush, to shape another human being into obedience. Her expression cooled into something thinner, sharper, more calculating. "Fine," she said quietly. "Let her go. Let her believe she's won. But this is not over. Send word to the parish authorities. Report her as a runaway. Offer reward. She'll be caught before sunset, and when she is, we'll see how brave she remains." Thibaud released her arm, relief flickering across his face now that the immediate bloodshed had been avoided. The other men drifted away in silence, already rehearsing the versions of the story they would someday dare to whisper. The baroness watched Margina until she disappeared around a bend in the road. Only then did she turn and walk toward the main house, her spine rigid, her steps measured, like someone holding herself together by sheer force of will. What happened inside the house in the hours that followed was later reconstructed from the testimony of servants. The baroness went straight to her chambers and locked the door, refusing all assistance. She remained there through the morning and well into the afternoon. When the cook brought her lunch tray and set outside the door, it stayed untouched. Around 4 o'clock, a housemaid noticed smoke curling from beneath the baroness's door. She shouted for help. Thibaud and several field hands came running. They broke down the door and found the baroness lying neatly on her bed, hands folded over her chest as though arranged for burial. She was dead. No signs of struggle. No marks of violence. The parish doctor was summoned. After examining the body, he declared the cause heart failure. The cook then admitted that the baroness had requested a special tea earlier that morning, a tea made from plants she cultivated in a small private garden. When the doctor examined the remaining leaves, he discovered them heavily mixed with foxglove and monkshood, both lethal in sufficient quantities. The official parish record dated May 22, 1847 reads simply, "Eloise DeVoe, age 41, died of heart failure. No suspicious circumstances." It was witnessed by Dr. Pierre Marchand, Magistrate Jean-Baptiste Hébert, and Overseer Gaspard Thibaud. But the unofficial accounts, the whispered ones, the ones written in private journals, tell a very different story. They say the baroness took her own life rather than face the humiliation of her failure, rather than live with the knowledge that her absolute power had been broken by someone she considered beneath humanity. She poisoned herself with herbs from her own garden, and she did it with the same icy calculation she had used in everything else. Within a week, the plantation burned. The official explanation blamed a lamp accident in the main house. But the workers, those who had endured years of the baroness's cruelty, knew better. The fire had been set deliberately, ignited in multiple buildings simultaneously by hands that understood exactly what they were erasing. It was an act of justice, of release, of reclaiming the ground where so much suffering had taken place. As for Margina, after she walked off the DeVoe estate, her trail dissolved into legend. No runaway notices matching her description appeared in any Louisiana newspaper. No parish records mention her capture or death. She simply vanished from official documentation, leaving only the impossible story of what she survived and what she accomplished. 3 letters, still preserved today in the Louisiana Historical Collection in Baton Rouge, offer the only surviving descriptions of what happened after her escape. Each was written by a neighboring planter within 2 weeks of the incident. and each describes essentially the same sight. A young woman walking north along the river road with 8 enormous dogs, refusing help, refusing threats, carrying herself with a sense of purpose that made armed men step out of her way. One letter, written by a planter named Adolphe Landry to his brother in Natchez, recounts an encounter at a crossroads. She appeared as one who had passed through fire and come out remade. The dogs moved around her with military exactness. Her bearing held the authority of a commander, though she was nothing of the sort by birth. When I asked if she required assistance, she fixed me with a look that made me regret the question, and answered, "I am exactly where I need to be." The dogs shifted to stand between us, not threatening but unmistakable. I stepped aside. I cannot deny I felt relief once they were gone. The dogs themselves add a final layer of mystery. 8 valuable hounds, where the small fortune collectively vanished with Margina. There were no bills of sale, no advertisements, no reports of strays roaming the countryside. They left with her and disappeared into history. The DeVoe estate, after the fire, was auctioned off to settle the baroness's debts. The land was divided among 3 buyers. The buildings were never rebuilt. Within a generation, the plantation's boundaries were absorbed into surrounding properties, its history swallowed by time. The cellar beneath the kennel, the place where the impossible alliance was forged, was filled with earth and plowed under. Its exact location is lost, but the story didn't vanish. It survived in the oral traditions of the enslaved community, carried from one generation to the next as both memory and warning. Elderly former slaves interviewed in the 1930s by the Federal Writers Project occasionally mention a tale known simply as The Girl and the Dogs. The details shifted from teller to teller, names, dates, states, but the core remained unchanged. Someone who had been reduced to property, someone meant to be broken, someone who survived the death meant for her, and emerged with a kind of power her oppressor could never understand. Gaspard Thibaud, the overseer, left Louisiana less than a month after the Baroness's death. He moved to Texas, took work on a cattle ranch, and died in 1851 in a riding accident. His journal, found among his belongings and eventually donated to a regional historical society, remains the most detailed first-hand account of everything that transpired on the DeVoe estate. He wrote obsessively about what he had witnessed, trying to understand it, trying to reconcile his experience with the rules of nature he had always believed unbreakable. How a starving young woman had commanded starving hounds through nothing but will, instinct, and shared suffering. His final entry, written 3 days before his death, returned to the incident one last time. I have seen much cruelty in my line of work. I have taken part in more than I care to recall. But what the Baroness attempted surpassed even the extreme limits of our brutal institution. What the girl achieved surpassed even the limits of natural law. I will die never understanding it, and perhaps that is the punishment I deserve. The legal implications of the event were left untouched. Parish authorities, faced with a situation that challenged every fundamental assumption about order, hierarchy, and power, chose to document as little as possible. The Baroness's death was ruled natural causes. The fire was deemed an accident. Margina's disappearance was never investigated. To probe further would require acknowledging that the entire system of slavery, built on absolute hierarchy, presumed submission and unquestioned racial dominance, had been shaken by one woman and 8 dogs in a cellar. 3 enslaved people from the DeVoe estate gained their freedom in 1848, either purchased or granted manumission as part of settling the Baroness's debts. Their names appear in parish documents. Baptiste, the field hand who refused to descend the ladder, Marie-Louise, the cook who prepared the Baroness's final tea, and Thomas, a houseman who first noticed smoke coming from the Baroness's chamber. Whether their freedom was coincidence or quiet reward for their conduct during the crisis remains unrecorded. The broader historical context makes Margina's story even more extraordinary. This took place in 1847, 2 years before Harriet Tubman's first rescue mission, 14 years before the Civil War, in a region where slavery's grip was total and defiance was typically met with swift, overwhelming violence. For someone in Margina's position to survive, let alone walk away accompanied by 8 valuable hunting dogs, required circumstances so unusual, so perfectly aligned, that the story risked seeming fictional, if not for the surviving documentation. Yet the documentation does exist. Letters describing her walking north, Thibaud's journal, parish records of the baroness's death in the fire, the manumission papers for 3 formerly enslaved people, and the persistent oral traditions that carried the story long after official records attempted to bury it. Each piece alone proves little. Together, they form a narrative that forces us to question the comforting assumptions about power, hierarchy, and the permanence of oppression. The dogs themselves remain the most profound element of the tale. They were bred to dominate, conditioned to respond only to force and fear, kept in perpetual hunger to ensure their usefulness as weapons. Yet, when confined with someone who treated them as fellow captives rather than tools, they chose loyalty over violence, chose protection over brutality, chose to follow someone who offered empathy instead of someone who offered nothing but cruelty. Their choice, witnessed by multiple people and preserved in contemporary accounts, remains the part that scholars struggle with the most. Animal behaviorists examining the event have concluded that while pack bonding can occur under extreme stress, the speed and totality of the dog's behavioral shift far exceeds documented norms. The most honest conclusion appears in a 2003 paper by Drive Sarah Merchant, who wrote, "Either the eyewitness accounts were embellished to the point of mythology, or something happened in that cellar that revealed an interspecies capacity for empathy and communication we still do not fully understand." The most unsettling part of the story, however, is its intentional erasure. Someone, likely several people, made deliberate decisions to minimize documentation of what happened, to declare the baroness's death natural when it clearly was not, to ignore Margina's disappearance, to allow 8 expensive dogs to vanish without inquiry. These decisions reveal the true threat the incident posed to the institution of slavery. If one enslaved woman could refuse authority so completely, could unite with the very instruments of terror used to enforce control, what did that say about the system's presumed invulnerability? Authorities must have decided that it was better to let the event fade, better to write the bare minimum and move on, better pretend it never happened. But stories don't disappear just because officials want them to. They survive in whispers, in recollections, in family lore, in letters tucked into trunks, in journals found decades later. They survive because they contain truths too uncomfortable to acknowledge, yet too powerful to silence. So what do you think happened in that cellar during those 4 impossible days? Was it survival instinct, an unthinkably risky gamble that somehow succeeded? Was it something deeper, a capacity for empathy and connection that cuts across species and circumstance? Did Margina understand something about power that the baroness, for all her privilege and education, never could? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. This account challenges everything we think we understand about power, resistance, and the extraordinary possibilities that emerge when someone refuses to accept the role carved out for them. If you made it to the end of this story, you've traveled to one of the most disturbing, enigmatic episodes in American history, a story smothered by the people in charge, but never truly erased. Subscribe to this channel for more buried histories and forgotten mysteries that fracture the comfortable versions of the past. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another story that should have been lost to time, but refuse to die. Share this video with anyone who seeks the darker, stranger corners of history. And above all, keep questioning, keep digging, keep refusing to accept the simplified stories we're told. Because somewhere in Louisiana, a young woman once walked away from slavery with 8 dogs at her side, and no one in power could bring themselves to stop her. That impossible moment, the crack in the foundation of an entire system, matters more than any official record that tried to erase it. See you in the next mystery.